Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name's Jay Izzo, and oh, man, just another outstanding show. How do I do it? I know that's what you're asking me. Easy, great people who write great books, and I get to read them, and then I get to chat with them. Automatically great show. I don't have to do anything. It's that simple. It's pretty darn awesome, and I love it. Today's book, if you're driving, you may want to pull over just when you hear the title. Okay, you may want to pull over it, right? If you're listening to this by podcast. If you're watching us live and driving, shame on you. Shouldn't do that. Sheri Jacobs is her name. The book is The Unexpected Power of Boundaries. Stay with me, because there's a secondary title here that you need to listen to. Rethinking the Rules, Risks, and Real Drivers of Innovation. Okay, leaders, and I got a bunch of you out there. How many of you want to be more innovative and creative? Raise your hands. If you're driving, don't do that. All of you, thank you. I saw all the hands go up. That's fantastic. Here's the thing, folks, about the connection between boundaries and innovation. We don't do well in absolute freedom. We stink at it. Now, if you were I came from the farm, right? If you're a cow or a hog or something like that, and you have absolute freedom, they just wander. They'll just go. We don't do that. I mean, think about it. You go to a swimming pool, you see the boundaries, and you know this is how far we can go to a swimming pool. I put you in the ocean where there are no boundaries. What do? You stay pretty close to the shore, don't you? Why? Because you don't know what's out there. Harder to take a risk, isn't it? Play that back to your team. What do? You say, oh, you know what, team? I just want you to think outside the box. No, you don't, because they're not going to do it. They can't think outside the box. They can't, because they don't know the parameters. It's like swimming in the ocean. They don't know how far they can go. They don't know where it is. What's worse yet, some of you, I love this line. How many of you said this, leaders? I just want people to take initiative. No, you don't. No, you really don't want people to take initiative. You know why? Because when they do take initiative and they've crossed your boundary, which you haven't said what that boundary was, now you're all upset. Right? Because you say you want initiative. Right? But they spent half the budget. Well, you're mad. You didn't tell them they couldn't spend half the budget, did you? They took initiative, didn't they? And now you're upset. Well, they should have known. No, they shouldn't. You told them to take initiative. See, here's the problem. We're not really doing a very good job of communicating. We think we're doing a good job of communicating. We're not communicating specifics. Fact of the matter is, you don't want people to think outside the box. Make a bigger box where people can see the lines. But tell them what those parameters are. That's what we're going to talk about today. I know this is going to be a wake-up call for some of you, and some of you are going to kind of go, oh, Jay, this is really hard for me to hear. Yeah, it should be hard for you to hear, right? So let me introduce you to Sheri Jacobs, because she's amazing. By the way, congratulations to her. She just got found out she's going to be on like one of the biggest TED Talk stages in the world, in addition to all that other stuff, right? She's a globally recognized innovative strategist, best-selling author, wildlife photographer, keynote speaker, helps organizations unlock creative potential by rethinking boundaries, risk, and leadership. Her best-selling book, and she does a keynote on it, The Unexpected Power of Boundaries. I'm guessing she's probably going to do the TED Talk up somewhere around this area too. Offers bold, actionable frameworks that turn fresh ideas into real momentum. Audiences leave with tools they'll use immediately, and stories they'll remember long after. By the way, the thing about the book is she has example after example after example to demonstrate her points over and over again. Really good, well-researched. She's worked with global companies, national brands, fast-moving teams across a variety of industries to help them challenge assumptions, make smarter decisions more quickly, and build a culture, really, really important, where innovation isn't just encouraged, it's expected. She's founder of the Avenue M Group. She's helped empower over 300 organizations to unlock their potential and overcome the most pressing challenges. By the way, great researcher, entrepreneur, seasoned speaker. I got to throw this one in though. You know what? She's a multiple-time Boston Marathon runner. How cool is that? Is that cool? That's so cool, isn't it? And so, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show. Welcome the first time to the show, and I don't think it'll be the last time. Sheri Jacobs, welcome to A New Direction.
Wow, what an introduction, Jay. Thank you so much. I think I need to bring you with me when I go do my keynote so you can get that introduction.
Absolutely, I will do it. My fees are relatively reasonable. I'll just say that, yeah, right off the bat. So let's just start in the introduction, because I really do believe it starts here after reading this book twice. It's a study that was done by Tatiana Zakharova-Goodman, which I've been acquainted with when she brought out this piece of research. She studied how physical environments shape children's play. So without me giving it away, because this is really where everything stems from, where you come from, starts with this research. So why don't you kind of give folks kind of the quick Reader's Digest and where we're going to head as we journey together.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So one of the things she's curious about is, how do boundaries impact how children play? And it's something we all can relate in the workplace. But in this study, she asked a group of preschool teachers to take their kids to 2 parks. Both parks had slides, swings, wood chips, and a big grassy area, but one had a fence around it. So when the kids got to the first park, which had no visible boundary, no hedge or fence, or this is where you can play up until, that's a place where we would think that the kids would be more creative, according to what people always say in meetings, right? Except for when they got to that park, they huddled on the playground, and they did the same thing they did every time they went to the park. They went on the slides and the swings, or maybe in the sandbox. But when the same group of kids went to the other park just 1 week later, the one with the fence, that's when they ran. That's when they got creative. That's when they explored all the way up to the fence. And what she found in this little experiment, but I've also seen in my research, is that when we know how far we can go, when we have that safety of saying, this is how far you can explore and be creative and play, we'll do it. When we don't, when it's unlimited, we stay on the playground, which was originally going to be the title of the book, which is How Big is Your Playground? So I think we all can relate to that blank piece of paper. I don't know what to do with it. Boundaries, constraints. All right, now I can get started.
And this is where I want people to start thinking differently. Folks, we're going to have a mindset shift here on this, because we do better when we have some sort of boundary. When you say to your people, just go for it, be creative, be whatever. I think this is where you're speaking to this, Sheri, is that we just don't do well in that environment. And your part 1 of the book, which you call Boundaries, and chapter 1 is You Can Do Anything But Not Everything. You say boundaries aren't always barriers. In fact, they can be liberating. And sometimes the most beautiful thing may come not in spite of limitations, but because of them. Talk about that and what you're trying to get as we enter into this book.
Sure. So one of the things that I talk about is we need to explain to our teams the why and the what. The how is where they get to play. So the why is, why are we doing this, right? So just even before we get to the boundaries, explaining, why is this important? It may not be as big as a mission. It just may be, this is why this is important right now. Having clarity around the why is the starting point. The what are the boundaries. Now, boundaries come in 2 forms. They come in these are the constraints. This is what the environment we're working in, our budget, our time, our resources. And you can also put down boundaries that shouldn't be there. The redundancies that you have at work, the authorizations for people to get things done. There are a variety of boundaries. What's a challenge is when an organization has ones that are bureaucratic, that could probably be moved, and the ones that need to be in place so people know where to explore. Once you have the why and the what, that's when your team can really be creative. That's when they can come up with the ideas no one ever thought of before, because they know exactly what they can and cannot focus on.
You say here, without clear boundaries, people tend to play it safe. You reiterated that earlier. But you say something else here that really caught my attention. And I just want to read this, what you say. You said, too often a company's best and brightest aren't trying to experiment or innovate. They're simply trying not to get fired.
Right.
How did we evolve to that? Because that, when we say to people, I want you to be innovative and creative, but then I've got employees that are going, I just don't want to get fired. How did that evolve?
Well, I think there are two groups in that. So first, there's the group that really does want to be innovative and take risks, but they have no clarity around where they can do it. And they don't have a safe environment where people can experiment. Just run the little experiment. They don't work in that environment. And so it evolves to that place of I just don't want to get fired. But I also don't want to overlook the people that work in departments, whether it's in finance or in a regulatory place or in HR or just any department really, where they say, no, 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 we have to follow these exact rules. I don't want to get fired. I'm not willing to do it. They're the ones that can be more creative when they have really great clarity around, but this is the space where you can explore a new policy, a new way to do this. And sometimes we need that in those highly regulated, highly controlled environments for people to get creative. So there are definitely two instances. If you don't have the psychological safety of the environment where people can fail and learn, that's when they'll just say, I'm not taking any chances. But we do need it in both.
I do agree that we do. And I mean, certainly folks who are in the financial sector who have to have like FINRA laws and those type of things where they have to abide by those. I mean, the rules are very, very, very strict. And then, sometimes what a company does, they put even more rules so that you don't get close to that line, right? And so certainly we recognize that. But then when employees do have a little bit more freedom, I think sometimes what we do is we assume that they have freedom, but they don't assume that they have freedom because they're too afraid of that. And I think those people are the ones that probably have amazing and great ideas, which we'll talk about as we move on, but we'll never see them because they're too afraid to let them out.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you a story is that I worked in a highly regulated area 25 years ago, a new .com that actually made it, one of the few that did. And it's a highly regulated area and an area you wouldn't think would be as innovative, but we knew that we needed to be innovative so that we can become one of the category leaders, right? And in that area is payroll. So payroll, of course, we think of is very strict. However, we had great leaders at this organization, and they had a number of very strict boundaries around who's our audience, who we're serving, but we had the option. They were very open about this is where you can explore new things. This is where you can try things. Ultimately, that company made it, became the largest online payroll company in the world before it got acquired. But when it did grow, we had this question: how do we maintain that culture of innovation and let people know, in addition to having clarity around where they can explore? So we created the Best New Mistake Award. And I think that was really critical. And I get a lot of questions about that. So the Best New Mistake Award, it is something that the company would give 4 times the dollar amount of any other award, customer service or new product innovation. The best new mistake was if you tried something, it failed, but you learned. You didn't bet the company, but you did take a risk on it. And that award was the highest recognized and the highest monetary value for that award. So I really do think that we can create an environment, regardless of the industry, where people know where they can take risks and where they can experiment. And then we don't just say it, but we actually reward them for that.
I want to move. I love that, by the way. I want to move to what I'm calling paradox of choice when it comes to boundaries, right? For those of you who don't recall paradox of choice, it's like if we're given too many choices, basically we freeze and we don't do anything. And it comes under this heading, and I think it was Elena Gerstmann who said you can do anything but not everything. And it's because we have a hard time making choices among competing choices. And you actually give a fundamental principle of no more than 3. Talk about this, the paradox of choice, and those type of boundaries that are really important when we're starting to create and innovate.
Sure. So first is the relatable example. We all know it, whether you've been to the Cheesecake Factory or you've been in a meeting where all of a sudden you come back and the strategic plan has 30 initiatives, which is the one that you referenced with Elena Gerstmann. We've all been in a personal or a professional situation where there is too many choices, and that creates a paralysis. We don't know what to do, and we don't move forward on anything. And so having 3 choices is something that, you can do 3, 4, or 5, but the data has showed that when people are given 3 choices, it's easier for them to find the one that fits them. And then they can also work within that space. When we have just so many initiatives on our plate or so many options in front of us, we wander around and we go back to what we always do. So if you're at the Cheesecake Factory, you may flip through the menu, 265 items, and you go back and you order the chicken parmesan, right? Every single time. And if you are working in a company and you have all these initiatives and they get put on your desk, you're going to go back to like, well, this is the one that I can succeed on, that I've experience in. I'm just going to continue with it. It's the same as the kids on the playground that are going to go up and down the slide every time they go to the park because they have too many options when they don't know where the fence is.
And it happens, by the way, it happens all the time. We see it, right? You talk about the Cheesecake Factory, right? I don't care what restaurant. You see a restaurant with a big, huge menu. You don't even know where to start. It almost makes it easier when we have that one-page menu. Like, this is what we're serving today.
Right.
And if you've ever been to that restaurant that says, this is what we have today. This is what we're serving. Everything's fresh. Makes it really easy. I was at a restaurant one time and in Miami, Florida, great little Italian Sicilian restaurant. And there was no menu. And literally the owner came out and said, "What don't you want?" Do you know how hard it was to make a decision? It was so hard to make a decision. What don't I want? Okay, what don't I like? Well, I don't like this, I don't like that. And so he was going to build something around what I don't like, but it was really hard to make that decision because I'm like, "Oh, well, I don't know if this is what I want. I kind of know what I don't want, and I know what I don't like, but is that really what I want?" And it was such a mind twist in my head, right? Because I wanted that boundary. I really did. I really wanted something that was on an 8.5 by 11 sheet that said, "Here are the few choices that we have." So much easier, right?
Absolutely.
So much easier. Chapter 2, rethinking risk capacity. And I have to tell you, you made my head spin when I started thinking about risk capacity versus risk tolerance.
Yeah.
So, and you really helped me solve this problem. So what is the difference between risk capacity and risk tolerance?
Yeah, it may be one of my favorite parts of the whole book. So we frequently think about our tolerance for taking risks, and it can be low, medium, or high. I argue that that's actually the wrong thing for us to think about when you're trying to make a decision. What we should be considering is our capacity. What is our capacity if we took this risk, it didn't work? Can we come back? And there are a number of different things that we could evaluate that on. Now we're taking our feelings out of it and we're evaluating it based on anything from diversification of our revenue, our brand, our audience size, or other things that might work. So an easy example might be Amazon's going to have high risk tolerance. They have, deep pockets and they run lots of experiments. But my local pizza place that lives around the corner, that's around the corner from my house, they have very low risk tolerance. They have small margins. They have a small market that they can draw in, and only so many items in a small kitchen they can make. The decisions around trying a risk in those two environments are different, and it shouldn't have anything to do with how comfortable you feel with it. It should have everything to do with what the data says around your ability to experiment, learn from it, fail, and recover.
Yeah, I think this is we're gonna dig more into this. We're gonna take a quick break, but you and I are gonna dig more into this because I want to get into the psychological versus the structural component when we come back, because I think I really love what you did here in terms of, this is a teaser, folks. I really love what you did here between understanding risk tolerance psychologically versus capacity being structural. And I want to get into the data driven. You're listening to Sheri Jacobs, best-selling author of the book, The Unexpected Power Boundaries, Rethinking the Rules, Risks and Real Drivers of Innovation, right here. It's a pretty book too, by the way. I really like the colors. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, you tune into a new direction to grow your business and your mindset, but you can't move forward if you're worried about what's lurking in your inbox. That's where Data 443's Siren, C-Y-R-E-N, comes in. It's the industry standard for real-time email security and URL filtering. They stop phishing and malware before they ever strike, so you can focus on your success, not on your safety. Don't let a cyber attack derail your journey. Go to data443.com. Check out Siren, C-Y-R-E-N, today and secure your future. And Linda Kraft and Team Realtors. We all know that buying or selling a home isn't just a transaction, it's a major life transition. Whether you're buying your first place, making room for a new baby, or downsizing for retirement can be incredibly stressful. That is why you need the Linda Kraft team. For over 40 years, Linda has been helping people in the greater Raleigh community, Research Triangle Park community, and all over the world navigate these big life changes. Her team doesn't just sell houses, they take the stress out of the process so you can focus on your future. Don't go it alone. Let 40 plus years of experience work for you. Visit lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Sheri Jacobs, The Unexpected Power of Boundaries, Rethinking the Rules, Risks and Real Drivers of Innovation. Available wherever books are sold. Your local bookstore doesn't have it, you tell them to get it. Also, will you do me a favor? Check your local library. And if your local library doesn't have this book, ask your local library to bring the book in. It would really be valuable for them as well. So I really hope you will do that. Back to risk capacity and risk tolerance. You say that risk tolerance is psychological because there's an emotional component to it. You say risk capacity, on the other hand, is it's structural. Kind of talk us through these two, the emotional, psychological, and the structural, what you're really trying to get at in those two pieces.
Sure. So oftentimes either we're the leader or we are a member of a team and we have something that we need to get done. We've been given a task, we have to drive change, whatever it might be. And as we are going through the process of thinking through what are the different options and how I solve this problem, or how I drive more revenue, or how I get more customers, or whatever it might be, what always factors into it is, am I going to stick with what I've always done? Am I going to try something different? This new idea here, it may be very risky. Should I do this new idea or not? And then that's when the decision comes in, where if you have low risk tolerance, you might say, I'm not comfortable with trying that new thing, right? That's a feeling, that's an emotion that we have. And we of course have it. That has served you well in probably a number of situations. But as we're trying to now solve today's problems and navigate the uncertainty that we're facing right now, we know that there is a certain amount of risk we have to take in a lot of these decisions. So why not make it data influence? Let's make it something more structural. When we make those decisions that may not be in our comfort zone, let's look at the things that's going to impact whether we succeed, whether we fail, and how we recover. And that's really where the structure comes into it, so that honestly, it's just easier to make some of the decisions because you're making it on your capacity. What I want to add, Jay, is that I'm not advocating for people to have a high risk capacity. I'm advocating for you to know what your capacity is.
Mm-hmm.
If your capacity is low, you should know. You have small risks you can take.
Right.
What I have found, though, is that most people have a higher capacity than they think. And what you should know is, what is your level of capacity for taking risks?
You brought up in this whole thing, because this chapter really starts off with, companies that say, we're a data-driven company.
Mm.
And you make a really strong case here that you argue, this is what you said. You said, I argue for being data influenced instead of data driven.
Right.
And so, which to me sounds like, if we're data influenced, we want to operate from more of the risk capacity side versus the risk tolerance side. Whereas when we say we're data driven, there may be kind of this idea that we're going to hold on to something emotionally that may not be necessarily healthy. And maybe I've interpreted that wrong. Sort me out here if you can.
Yeah. First, I think that's a really interesting and a good interpretation of it. So I like to hear what your interpretation. When I think about data driven,
Mhm.
That is the company, the organization, the individual, the leader who says, I need 100%, I need 95% before we can move forward. Did we cross every T? Did we dot every I? Have you asked this group? Have you surveyed them again? Have you run that focus group? Have we collected every single data so that we know with absolute certainty that this is the way to move forward? And oftentimes it's because a chair, a board, a volunteer, a member of the team needs all that data. The problem is that everything's changed from when you started. And there's been enough literature, enough research done. I remember reading a book by Harvard, Harvard Business Review that said you should get 80% of what you need and move forward.
Yep.
80% of what you need is having that data influence, not data driven. And so if you were to shift one thing as a leader at your company, your team, even if it's a small little business you're running, say, we're going to shift from being data driven to data influence. Yes, we're going to use data, but if we're not going to wait until every T is crossed, we're going to get enough of what we need to then run a small experiment. And really, it's just running a small experiment. It's not betting the whole company.
I remember having an author on the show years ago who gave me something. She wrote the book Undaunted, and she said, sometimes you have to build the plane while it's in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that we can't have the plane completely built. You've got to, and I think it's that 80% rule of we're 80% there, it's a go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of this perfectionistic rule, because the enemy of excellence is perfection. And I think oftentimes when we're so data driven, what happens is we want that, absolute surety that it's going to work. There's no such thing as that. And so then I think it does become emotional when we're data driven, because we want this emotional security that says, oh yeah, I'm now really, I'm at the point less than 0.05 level as an old stats teacher, right? P less than 0.05.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to go on that. But that's really an emotional type of decision versus saying, okay, I'm data influenced. You know what? We've run the studies. Okay, maybe we don't have all the answers, but we're 80% there. We can go because I've got that risk capacity. That to me is a very hard transition for a number of leaders, I think, that operate from what they call a data-driven type of company. Your experience as well?
Yeah, and I have actually an unusual example that does support this, but in a different kind of way. And there's two groups of people. One thought we needed more data to confirm, and the other said, no, we have enough. And so years ago, again, back to the Sure Payroll company, we're just starting out, and our risk capacity was small. We had a very short runway. We did not have a lot of money, and we needed to be successful or we were going to close our doors. So we had what seemed like the perfect experiment to run on how do we get more customers. We had a partnership with Citibank, beautiful, well-respected brand. This is back in the day when people got their bank statements in the mail. And so nobody had them online. So 100% of them were opened, and 100% were opened by the business owner. And they were sent to 300,000 small business owners. So here we are with an offer co-branded with a very reputable bank. Here is a special offer to all small businesses. We were like perfect experiment, right? We brought in all these temp workers. We lined up landline phones. We got 3 calls. We got 1 new customer. 300,000 went out. So we pulled the plug. Troy Hennekoff was our president at the time. He pulled the plug. Other people on the team said, no, but maybe it was the wrong offer. Maybe, what if we tested this? What if we ran this, right? Because we're all used to in marketing of like, well, it could be the offer. It could be the message. It could be the creative. It could be timing. And he's like, no, we have enough data. This is perfect. We are shifting to sales. And quickly we shifted to sales. And then we gave, again, the sales team boundaries. We said, you're only going after this customer base, but you can write your script. This is the offer. And within less than our targeted number of months, we became the largest online payroll company in the world. So I look back at that story from years ago and think, how many times do people have to say, oh, but we got to run the A/B split. We got to check on this and check on this. Sometimes, especially if your capacity is lower, 80% is really important to follow.
Yes. Great. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've heard, I've interviewed a number of special forces military folks.
Mhm.
They argue the same thing. If they're 80%, sure, they go.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, then all of a sudden things change too quickly. I
right.
want to just touch on this real quickly. Knowing the difference between ready and willing. And you say
Mm.
this. One of the most common missteps in innovation strategies is confusing willingness to take risks and readiness to take them. Really important, I think, concept here in this chapter that I think you should talk about in terms of those boundaries. Gi-
Yeah,
give us a little more here.
sure. So we've been talking about it because willingness is your tolerance. Willingness is
Mhm.
I have a willingness to try something new. I have a willingness to do something, but you're not always ready. And readiness is something that we often overlook when we say, "Well, we got to have change happen. We've got to do something. What are we going to do to reverse this course, or to bring in new customers, or to whatever it might be that we're trying to do?" And so you may have a strong high level of willingness, but you may not be ready. Now, I share a fun anecdote in the book. I'm pretty sure it's in this chapter, about myself, and I have high risk tolerance. I am. I love change and I love taking on risks, but I don't always, like all of us, really think, am I ready for that change? So I think I shared it in this chapter, but when it was COVID and everybody else was trying their hand at baking sourdough bread, I decided to learn to play tennis.
Yes.
And because I'm not just a tennis player, I'm a runner, but I have to run Boston. And I'm a tennis player, I need to be the best. So I'm like, well, I'm going to get the best shoes. And they're the ones named after Roger Federer because he's the best tennis player. I wasn't ready. I hadn't done any of my research. I put on those shoes. It turns out they're not court shoes, they're leisure shoes. And I quickly rolled my ankle so badly, I was out of the game for a while. And then I took a step back and I said, oh, I had the willingness to jump in and try new things.
Mm,
I wasn't ready. I needed to gather some more data. So it's an
right.
interesting take on it. And honestly, I don't remember if that's in that part of the book,
It
but
is.
that's one that
It
comes to
is.
mind. Yeah.
It is. It's in that part of the book because I remember reading it and I thought it was pretty funny because and you talked about getting the racket, like
Everything.
everything. You were going all in, and then you end up twisting your ankle because it was really the wrong shoe. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, it was really the wrong shoe of it.
Yeah.
Um, you talk about becoming disciplined with your risk capacity, and here's what you say. You say medium risk capacity is the most misunderstood and possibly the most dangerous zone. Not because they are the most vulnerable, but because they mistakenly believe they're ready to go all in.
Mhm.
Help us understand that.
Yeah. So you have to decide. There's different criteria for different businesses, organizations, companies, size of companies, industries, et cetera. So you can't be told what is ready. You have to decide what are the key factors that you need to pay attention to. So let's say you have a medium, capacity for change, but there is certain areas where they're lower. So one of the questions you really have to think through is, what do I need to have as high capacity? Is it revenue? Is it brand reputation? Is it other a diverse portfolio? So if this new idea doesn't work, like what is it that and how long you've been in business for? So I was thinking about realtors, right? You mentioned one of the realtors who's a
Mhm.
sponsor of this program, and realtors focus in one area, and they may be thinking, I wonder if we could expand to people who are moving into Raleigh. Is that, we're not going to go from residential to commercial, but maybe we're going to expand some of our audiences. This is going to take up time and money. And
Mm.
so you have to evaluate, what, we're fine. Because if we go in that direction and we succeed wildly, it's adjacent to what we do, it's perfect. But if you're brand new and just starting out, you have to really think through, is that the best way for you to grow? So the answer is not going to be the same for every group. I know that's not the story in the book, but that's the one that comes to mind.
I love the story. There's other stories in the book that are just real, but I love the story, and I think it's always good when we're doing this that you bring in fresh stuff that they may not see or read in the book. So I love new stories. Um, the one thing I want to mention to the listener is, and you can talk about it too after I mention it, is that Sheri has a capacity quiz
Mhm.
basically a risk capacity quiz in there. I don't want to overlook that because I know you put a lot of work and research into that. But I found it really kind of wow, that's kind of cool how you come up with this risk capacity. Do you want to spend just a little bit of time discussing that a little bit to help people understand that in the book because it is a valuable resource.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jay. So, yeah, I won't go through all the details in the capacity quiz, but what I will say is if you're going to take it, which I highly recommend, don't just do it yourself. Ask every member of your team to also take the capacity quiz. It's going to ask questions about, your revenue, and it's going to ask about your brand and about resources and other things that you should be using that are true data points that should be helping you in your decision making. But what's really interesting is that I've run this study, this quiz, with thousands of people, but with many different groups. And when we do with the different groups, we'll ask from the entry level, the person, the frontline staff, to the most senior person on the team, and their answers are different.
Mhm.
And so, what's critical about the quiz is it not only gives you that data point around where you think your capacity is to take risks, but it also shows you where your team thinks that you have the capacity and where the gap is between what you think and what the rest of your team thinks.
So awesome. By the way, I thought it was really cool. I
So,
just saying, I just thought it was really neat. I thought it was a really cool little tool that you had in there. I'm going to move to chapter 3, which is called The Boundaries We Move, but I want to move down towards the end of the chapter or middle end of the chapter. How to develop effective creative parameters. Because you mentioned some things. I'm going to bring these up and I'm just going to have you expand on them a little bit if you don't mind. So you say to create effective parameters that genuinely enable rather than restrict, here's some guidelines. Number one, focus on outcomes, not methods.
mhm.
What do you mean?
Yeah. So, methods are the how. And when you focus on the how right away, people are just going to follow that directive. If you focus on what it is that you want as an outcome of the effort, then you may surface new ideas. And oftentimes we all jump, myself included, we jump right to the this is how we're going to get this done. But what if we change the conversation and said, whatever we do, we want the outcome to be this. And that opens up more creativity, but it also still provides those guidelines. It also could show you where you have boundaries that might need to be moved. It might be the only way to achieve that outcome is to rethink some of those boundaries. Are they out of date?
Love it. Next one is make parameters measurable.
Yeah, I mean, what we all need is to know, to have clarity around what it is and what are the finances, what are the constraints that are there, and once we have that, we want to be able people to take risks, to experiment, to come up with creative ideas, but we need to know if they're the right ideas. We need to know, how do we measure if they are going to align with our why, with our outcomes, with what we're doing. So having that clarity for yourself, for your team, around what is measurable so that you know it is aligning with what the outcome is part of the process.
Mention a little bit in here about being specific and actionable metrics,
Mm.
rather than saying we're just going to
Yeah,
improve.
yeah. So oftentimes people say we need to improve customer service. We need to improve the onboarding of bringing on a new employee here. Um, Rather than making that kind of statement, having it so that it's very specific. So we want to change so that instead of it's 14 days, in 7 days, we onboard the new employee, and this is specifically what happens. Or in customer service, rather than making a broad statement of better customer service, let's have a very measurable number that people can
Mm.
work towards, a time frame, a number, an improvement. It could be 5%, improvement in satisfaction. But when you provide in something that's very measurable and specific to it, then people know what they're working towards. If you just simply say, let's improve customer service, it's too vague.
Yeah, I like to think of it from our box analogy. Maybe it's my box analogy that I used earlier. It's both of ours, I guess, in some ways. Length, height, and width.
Hmm.
How big is the box going to be, right? So give it
Right.
the length, give it the height, give it the width, right? Make sure that it's a measurable piece, not something that's just out there. We talked about the three. limiting the parameters to 3. One of them here is, though, next one is know when to move your parameter.
Mhm.
What?
Well, I was the company that I own, Avenue M. We were brought in to help the Brooklyn Public Library look at policies around getting out library cards. And it's pretty simple across the country. Turns out they're pretty outdated. They were done in the 50s for many libraries, and they made sense at the time with the way that the households were made up and how people got library cards. And in addition to that, they also wanted to look at how they distribute books, because at the time their policies were made when the only way we distributed books were physically. And so it had to be somebody who lived in that geographic area. But we all know that there are digital books now and that life has changed in many different ways. And so there was a question of, well, how do we revisit this? How do we go back and say, do those boundaries still exist today? Are we still achieving our why, our mission with those boundaries? And it turns out that those boundaries needed to be moved, that those set rules were no longer serving the community, their mission, and what they're trying to do, which is just get books into the hands of people who want to have access to books. That's one example of it, but I really do think that in the workplace, in so many different areas, we set rules and we don't go back and revisit them. And many of those rules, whether it is around who are the customers you're serving, the audience, the size of the audience, the products that you're doing, going back and revisiting those rules and saying, yeah, these ones make sense. These ones, I think we can move. The world has changed.
Her name is Sheri Jacobs. The book is entitled The Unexpected Power of Boundaries, Rethinking the Rules, Risks, and Real Drivers of Innovation. Isn't she great? I'm telling you, she's just great. Just fun. I could do several hours with her and just sitting at her feet, just listening to her, just teach me. I just would be awesome. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, in the digital world, your inbox is the front line. Is yours defended? Data 443 Siren, CYREN, provides next generation anti-phishing and threat detection that works instantly in the cloud. It's the invisible shield that keeps your business running smoothly while blocking the chaos outside. Protect what you've built. Head over to Data 443. That's data number 43.com. Get protected today. And Linda Craft Team Realtors. If you're planning a move, you have to check out lindacraft.com. I'm a little biased, admit it, but honestly, it is much more than home listings, which everybody has. Linda understands that moving impacts your whole entire family, including your kids and your pets. That's why her website features an exclusive advice from a child psychologist on how to help kids adjust to the move, and even tips from a veterinarian on how to move with pets. It is a complete emotional resource. See the difference for yourself. Log on today at lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. You know what? Look, I grew up in the Midwest, and out there, we hate spinning tires in the mud. Trust me, out on the farm, we did that. So if you're a leader feeling stuck right now, let's skip the 400-page textbooks and let's get right to the point. I'm Coach Jay. I combine high-level executive psychology with plain old common sense to turn frustrated leaders into absolute winners. You don't need more corporate jargon. You need traction. Let's get you winning again. Head on over to coachingmavericks.com and let's get to work. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend. She doesn't know we're friends, but we're friends. Sheri Jacobs, The Unexpected Power of Boundaries, Rethinking the Rules, Risks, and Real Drivers of Innovation. Before we exit some of these guidelines that you have for this, I do want to hit the one guideline that I didn't get to, and that was connect to a broader purpose. You say effective parameters aren't arbitrary. They connect directly to organizational mission and strategy. Without purpose, parameters can feel bureaucratic. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it goes back to the why, and without people knowing why we're doing something, it's very hard for them to think of ideas that maybe would work, but it's not connected to the why, right? The broader purpose of doing it. It also can mean that people can go down a path, even if you have really well-defined box, the length, the width, the height, everything is well-defined, but they're going to spend a lot of time in an area that may not be the right best use of their time and resources and efforts because they don't understand the broader purpose of this. So even when you have those parameters in place, it's essential that people know how it connects back to what you're trying to achieve, and that you have clarity around that, because clarity is really I always say that growth happens at the speed of clarity, and clarity comes from having boundaries.
I agree with you so much, because again, when I opened up the show, I just said we're just so much on the same page, because we all experience this, where when we don't have boundaries, we think we want absolute freedom. We just don't operate in it well. Part 2, called Voice, by the way, chapter 4, called The Culture of Curiosity. Wow. I want to talk about something that you say here that I found really, really important, is sometimes the freshest ideas come from the person with the least experience, who are the least experienced. Why is that
Yeah.
true?
So they don't have, it's the baggage. They don't have the experience of seeing that something didn't work, why it didn't work. They come in with questions, with a sense of curiosity about why things are done a certain way. And there may have been a really good, valid reason for us to have done it that way in the past. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're not making sure that you're not, that those voices can be heard, then you'll never go back and rethink and say, should we continue to do it that way? It is, years ago, somebody said to me that most leaders are 3 people away from the person who's closest to the customer, the client, the patient, whomever it might be. And that person who is closest is oftentimes the newest person on the team. They're entry level. They don't have as much experience. They're the ones that see the problems. And they're the ones that also may have solutions that we may not see.
In this chapter 4, you talk about creating a culture of listening.
Mhm.
And I don't want to overlook that. I tried to. I'm going to be honest with you. I tried to jump onto chapter 5, but I can't. So you have this. You have some parameters here too, where you talk about conduct an annual closest to the customer listening tour, encourage small tests of new ideas with minimal downsides, get creative with high impact ideas, explore previous overlooked audience segments, recognize and reward the messenger, not just the outcome. I think but creating this culture of really listening to people is terribly difficult. And you've had to experience, how do we really go about creating that culture?
Yeah, I have something new that's not in the book, but I do speak in my keynotes, and I think it's really critical. So I'm starting to think about, like, what are really actionable things that you can do right after you've listened to the show when you're back at work tomorrow. And one of the things is, if you are the leader, the senior most person in the room, speak last. In every meeting, speak last, right? Because once you start, then people just fall in, and then they agree, or they support what you've said, or they bring up ideas that support it. But if you always speak last, that is one way that you can do it. A second is, we all process, think, and say things in different ways. Some of us are introverts, some are extroverts, some are comfortable speaking up, some are too junior. And so make sure that you have different methods for people to contribute. So it's not always going to be in a meeting, in person, or via email, or in a group setting, but allowing people to really contribute ideas, write it down. So one of the things I've been recommending lately is, if you have an agenda, you have a topic you're going to discuss in a meeting with your team, share it ahead of time, ask them to write down a couple ideas, and then bring those ideas, and then allow people to be able to share those ideas before you even speak. That way, people have had time to think about it, and everyone gets an idea that they can share. It is hard to do, Jay. You're absolutely right. I think you have to be purposeful about it.
It's got to be so intentional.
Yeah.
It has to be, and it does have to start with leadership. It can't. You have to be the one who does the listening, not the talking. I agree with you on that. I just think it's so critical. In chapter 5, you talked about the good catch model that was done in the healthcare industry. I want to go to something that you did say, though, later on in this chapter, that I found so awesome. And it was a subtitle that you had in the chapter that was Recessions Shrink Resources, but Expand Possibility. And here's what you say. There's something counterintuitive about recessions. While they shrink access to funding and customers, they often expand what's possible. Oh, intriguing for those who want to know.
Yeah. So you can't always predict and you can't control when you may want to or need to start a business, want to or launch a new product. That what's going to happen in the exterior world, whether it is things that are happening completely out of your control with political issues, the government, or a recession, whatever it might be, those are things that are external. But you already had this idea. And for me, and I don't remember if I brought it up in the book there, but what I'm thinking about is when I launched my company in this recession, 2008, 2009. And people said, are you crazy? Go get a safe job and work somewhere. And I thought, no, this is like the best opportunity for me to start a business. And if you look back in the history at a lot of companies that were extremely successful, they did it. They did the same thing. I mean, Airbnb is one that comes right to mind, and Netflix, but there were others that we don't actually realize, but they started when things were tighter and they were able to get more creative and to take actually bigger risks because they had to. So I really do think I've always been a believer that there is so much opportunity in the overlooked space, and that overlooked space happens when everybody goes back to what's comfortable and familiar, and that's when there's fewer people, fewer competitors, and more opportunity there.
I really want to dig into this. I don't think we have the time, but I want to just tell people what this. There's a subtitle in her chapter here. It's called "What Do Elephants, Dead Fish, and Vomit Have to Do with Psychological Safety?" It is probably the greatest title. I don't know that we have. I don't know how soon we can explain it, but if we can even do it, do you want to try it?
I don't know if I can. I mean, I know the story behind it, but I don't have it all detailed written in front of me.
So yeah, so elephant is the elephant in the room, right? That nobody wants to talk about. Dead fish were the unresolved issues, the resentments that we still have towards everybody. And the vomit is when finally somebody just, excuse the expression, pukes up everything that they were thinking about to make a complaint. Right. And so they do all this, and then but it's connected to psychological safety, because do they have the safety to really do all three of those things?
Right. And first, they have a name for it, right? It's one thing to say, oh, you know what? You can bring any issue up here. Absolutely. Come tell us about the things. But nobody raises the elephant in the room. And recently I was with a group of individuals, very, very, very successful entrepreneurs. And one of them walked into this meeting and said, I'm going to bring up the elephant in the room. And the relief that you saw people have, and that individual did. And everybody was thinking it walking in. It was the very first thing that he said when he walked into the room. I've experienced it. I talk about it in the book about how different organizations have used this theory. But when you name it and then you allow it and then you model it, that's when you see ideas and things happen.
We've done an hour, Sheri. You've been outstanding. It's gone really, really fast.
It has.
It always does. Tell folks how they can get hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach me at SheriJacobs.com, which is SHERI Jacobs.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. And yeah, reach out to me anytime. My book is on Amazon and would love to connect.
I'd love it. Sheri, stay with me, please. Hey, folks, you know what I say to you every week, right? You're in control of three things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. Fact of the matter is, life doesn't always give us what we want. And sometimes we find ourselves in circumstances we didn't ask for. But you are in control of your attitude. I know it's not easy, but you can control it. Make it a positive attitude. That's within your control. Secondly, your effort's tied to your excellence. We don't always have the same amount of energy in our bodies or in our tank, but whatever you do have, be excellent with it. That's up to you too. And finally, we all get punched in the teeth, punched in the gut. We're gonna get knocked down, but it's up to you to get back up. Why? Because you're worth it, and we need you on the team. I'll be back next week with another great guest. It's gonna be another great book. It's gonna be another great show. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. I thank you for that. I'm internally grateful. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Give us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to the show. Tell a friend. That really helps too. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.